Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to video game news for Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024. So, yeah. I have managed to actually play more Punch Club and make more shorts, schedule things, so I am getting a little bit closer back to getting to a point of being productive. Punch Club, though, now that I'm like probably 30 hours into the game, it keeps shooting itself in the foot in that it is changed so much that as I progress, money is like no longer an issue, but then it takes away any opportunities where money would actually be useful, and mostly, even worse than that, it mostly takes away opportunities where you could take some extra boxing matches. As a boxing management simulator game, you would think there would be some locations you could just always go and take on 2 or 3 extra fights, but no, it isn't that case. Like they make it seem like it might be that case, but it really isn't. And in reality, even if I could take on the extra boxing fights and unlock every single skill that is available, I think it likely is only going to have minimal effect on the outcome. I think, somewhat close towards the end of the gameplay. But yeah, it's certainly not helping me. It's certainly just creating situations where I'm wasting a lot of time, and it certainly is creating a situation where the experience is just not particularly fun, and that is something you never really want to have said about your game, as it were, is that you're just making your game worse as the story goes forward. And it definitely feels like it's a game that is struggling with its own development, in the sense that it feels like the game developers were really good at making little sprite-based 16-bit style animation loops, and they were pretty decent about drawing backgrounds. They've drawn far too many backgrounds for what the game is, but there's just not an actual good gameplay experience. I think I can make that statement fairly concisely at the moment. Yeah. It also runs into this problem of you're running into stronger and stronger enemies that might very well be balanced against whatever stats you have, and it is practically impossible to get your stats above a 13-13-13 because you're losing so much stats at the end of each day. You lose about 117 stat points, and I think you probably need 1,000 stat points per level. And working out, you can get maybe 300 stat points if you focus on one thing, but you really can only get slightly over 100 stat points if you focus on all 3 of them. So bringing all the stats to the maximum, I think, is just mathematically impossible. Now, there are some skills that you can unlock if you can get fights to get skill points that would increase the amount of experience you get working out, and you basically have to take those skills and seek those skills out. And it still doesn't really change the outcome of the fights well enough. Mostly you just need to focus on stamina and getting your health and energy bars to be the highest spots possible. Yeah. And so it really is just an annoying experience that I wonder if I am not just going to end up wasting so much time with the game that at some point I'm just going to rage quit it with only 1%, one more fight to go. Yeah. And certainly it's a pretty terrible experience for the first 10 to 20 hours of playing Punch Club based on what the experience is at the end. Had I played the game on easier, maybe I would have gotten to the better 4th or 5th act that I'm in. But also, it's very much still a difficulty plateau instead of a difficulty spike followed by a difficulty slope. Okay, and once again my network connection doesn't seem like it's going to want to fix itself. This time I think it was a different problem, but I don't think the only thing I can do here is try and stop the stream and start it again. And I guess we'll see if that works, although that doesn't seem like that usually works. So let's see. I'm gonna wait 30 seconds. I'm still not playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I'm done with Yu-Gi-Oh! At this point. I'm just using it for background music. I did just look at the Google Play Android beta, where some small group of experimental games are playable on Windows. But yeah, the number of games on the Google Play beta, which that beta has been around for probably over a year, and I don't think Google is actually doing anything with it, or ever going to actually do anything with that. But yeah, ideally what I'd like to do is do the dailies on Memento Mori instead of having Yu-Gi-Oh! As the background. Yeah, nothing seems like this is going to fix this, and this is crazy because that, unless there's just been some slight power flicker, which maybe there has, the problem with my network should have been fixed a few days ago. Yeah. It's not even the same problem this time. It might be that I turned up the QoS on my router, which that was probably a mistake. Like, theoretically, my internet is around 300 megabits per second, but in reality, it's closer to 85 megabits up and down because of a lack of consistency, a lack of stutter. It's kind of like you get 85 guaranteed, and then if there's enough traffic, it'll open up the lanes to 300. So in previous experiments, when trying to get rid of stutter and latency, which is much more important when streaming, and frankly much more important than speed in most usage cases, downloading and playing video games also, or streaming uploading versus streaming downloading, all of that is better with latency. So there's definitely a possibility there. Oh yeah, and I set up a whole thing to automate that whole process when I probably shouldn't have. So it may have also turned up the QoS. And really messing with router settings while streaming is not an effective use of my time. Let's see. Let's see if I can do anything here. Like, theoretically, this should be doing speed tests. And yeah, the latency is just really high. Well, apparently this hasn't changed anything. But I question maybe if it should. I might have to do some hardcore math. Anyways, this is not video game news that I'm doing right now, so... And I just can't do anything else about it, so this is just going to be another stream issue. The reason, unfortunately, I can't do Memento Mori is that I would have to basically stream it from my phone, and I'd probably get more mentally attached to actually doing the dailies on Memento Mori. But the biggest issue is Memento Mori is based around playing these very nice songs. That's their sell points, and because of that, they have those songs available for purchase as soundtracks. So all the nice songs in the game very likely would get Content ID claimed, if not copyright struck. So it just doesn't kind of work. I could play in silence, certainly, and I don't have any other daily game that I could play. Tinkafuma is an adult game, so obviously I can't do that on YouTube. The Cardcaptor Sakura Memorial Key game I'm going to abandon very quickly as soon as I finish the story modes. The new Pokemon card game, it would be a Nintendo product, so that would be a no. And I just don't have any other game that I'd be interested in doing. Now, weirdly, a lot of this would change if I just got away from Windows. And that is, I guess, the big project, particularly if SteamOS came out and could be installed on computers. That would be the next big project, is just to see what programs do I have left that I actively use that would struggle to convert over to Linux, either using Wine as a compatibility layer or finding an alternate replacement application. And I only have a few programs left that I use, and they may all be compatible with Wine or have Linux versions of their own builds or alternative versions. Anyways, so it's no surprise I don't get too many views when the first 15 minutes of my streams are rambling and dealing with network issues that I have no idea why I'm having network issues right now. But I also was feeling that. I think maybe my router just needs to be rebooted. I guess there is a thought I could just reboot my router before every stream. That's kind of crazy, but and it may not help. Anyways, let's start talking about video game news. We've been scrolling down here. Throne and Liberty, which I believe was funded in part by Amazon.com, has made a big bump into 7th spot here. Whereas unfortunately Banana, Counter-Strike 2. All of these seem to have a lot of bots still playing them, which brings their numbers artificially high. That would be my assumption. We've heard nothing new from Deadlock, but it's still holding strong. So people often do seem like they are just getting into games and playing them and not particularly talking about them too much. Metaphor ReFantasio is doing fairly well for a Japanese RPG that is a new series. Trading Card Shop Simulator is still being popular amongst streamers, I suspect. And yeah, I don't know if there's anything else new here. Palworld has fallen quite a bit at this point, down to 76. So by the time the lawsuit happens, Palworld potentially could have just spent all the money they ever were going to make and disappear into the night if they can get away with that. This first Descendant is not the game I was thinking of. There's a game called Descendant or something like that. Yeah, even Binding of Isaac Rebirth is low in the numbers. Like, you get a loyal fan base, and that loyal fan base may stay around for quite a long time. I doubt very many bots are playing Binding of Isaac. It'd be kind of crazy. Whereas I suspect a lot of bots are playing Cats. But yeah, there usually is just not an official thing that ends games. The industry is just always growing, and the player base is always growing, and eventually it just comes down to a couple of people decide to play something different. So we don't need that Google search. Yeah, that is the second reason why me playing Memento Mori on the stream could be an issue, is because I could get into it fairly deep, but Sega has just sued Bank of Innovation, the maker of Memento Mori, for patent infringements in Japan, I assume, around gacha. Sega is like the #1 gacha company, like in their arcades, and with COVID in particular, they shut down, I think, pretty much all of their arcades now in Japan. So all the pachinko machines and gambling and where they were making massive amounts of money have dried up, and so now they're trying to sue people based on patents that probably should not be enforced, patents that should be like nullivated, just because they're so generic at this point. There is nothing particularly unique as far as the gacha in Memento Mori. You play the game and you get crystals, or you buy crystals, and then you use them to draw based on a draw percentage. There's nothing special there. There are different pools and different draws you can do, like so many other games. If any of these patents were actually enforced against Bank of Innovation, then Sega is going to be setting a precedence where they could sue every single gacha game that is on mobile phones, and if that's the case, then that in one fell swoop might destroy gaming on mobile phones as far as gacha gaming goes. And since the vast majority of games on mobile phones are gacha games, I mean, in the long run, maybe just having this apocalypse happen as far as games libraries available on Android would force game developers on mobile games to make something different. But in the short run, there would be no games, and there would be no profit in making games, since nothing else is profitable. And I don't think a single lawsuit is going to change that. So yeah, I definitely think Sega should fail in this pursuit and should have never engaged in this pursuit. There's still a significant number of people who have never heard of Memento Mori, even though it is probably in the top 30 most successful, most profitable games on Android. So the Streisand effect here is very possibly, at the 2-year anniversary of Memento Mori, going to just bring a lot of new players to Memento Mori, and some people will find it fun, and a lot of people will probably find it boring, since it is mostly automated experience at its core, but then has a lot of management stuff. There's just a lot of different daily quest buttons you have to click to start the whole automated process. And then there are some non-automated process. I'm fairly deep into the game on one account, and you hit this plateau where it just gets more and more expensive to get more and more of the characters, to level up the characters. Once you get your characters up to about level 200, 220 or so, it becomes almost exponentially more difficult to level it up higher. And my personal goal, which is just to own at least one of each of the characters, is actually fairly difficult to accomplish. So, we saw a new game on the 24-hour concurrent list. That being said, the overall sample points on my chart don't think are going to change much. Yeah, this is all going to be much slower changes, much more consistent changes. Yeah, a game like Counter-Strike 2 would effectively have to shut down, and then it still probably would take several weeks before things like PUBG would overwhelm it, get higher points. And I guess the big number here as far as points go is that if you get 100 points every time there's a sample date, and I'm sampling it 3 times a week, so you take 52 weeks in a year, multiply that by 3, 150 52 times 3 would be 156. Multiply that by 100 points, and then that's 15,600. So that potentially could be my marker, and that's a fairly high number to say at 15,000 points games get retired because to a Hall of Fame. But that would imply something has just gone to be very popular for a full year, and that would only make sense after I've sampled for a full year. I've only been sampling for 3 or 4 months. But yeah, I guess that would be the right math, and that would be a mathematical way to start to automatically retire some of these games that have less relevancy than it may seem like they do. I'd also like to see my chart automatically start to move away from these darker colors, because they are fairly ugly. Steam Next Fest is not being promoted as much on Steam's front page. But Throne and Liberty is being promoted. Let's see if we hover over Throne and Liberty, though. Looks like a more Western style fantasy game. We might be headed towards a more early fall festival sale. Deathloop is, yeah, that was one of those games that was promoted very heavily, and it is mostly positive, but it really only starts to make sense at $11. Definitely didn't make sense at $60 when it came out. Vampire Survivors is also 25% off, which puts it in a cheap price. It was already at a cheap price. But yeah, since the Next Fest has ended, it does feel like maybe in a week or two, probably 2, we might have an earlier Fall Fest, perhaps trying to avoid what is the growing rush of other sales, in particular Amazon Prime Days sales happening earlier and earlier, and then other online stores and even local stores moving their sales to be earlier and earlier. Which in the long run, if they did just move a lot of these sales to be a month or 2 earlier, it would probably be very helpful. A major amount of my current financial struggles is certainly being made worse by the previous Prime Day sale, but mostly it's just remodel cost. But I can already feel that there's a decent argument to still buy more when Black Friday comes for decorating and remodeling reasons. The one good thing that I got from this is because credit cards have been run up, that is the perfect time to ask for an increase in credit limits. So I was able to just go through the automated process of asking for increased credit limits and was approved for both of those. Of course, I might be small dings on my credit reporting score, but in the long run, you can't use what you don't have. Of course, I'm just increasing the credit limits to increase the credit to debt ratio that I have, and I'm paying off all these credit cards every month, so I'm not actually paying any interest on anything, which is the right way to do it. You want giant credit cards that you probably will never even use, with the highest credit limits possible and no carried over balance month to month. But you do want to show some usage on your cards. And yep, if a big emergency happens, let's say if a medium emergency happens, then a giant credit limit on a credit card might help you quite a bit. A huge medical emergency where you owe $500,000 or several $1,000,000 is just going to lead to bankruptcy anyways. And at that point, if you're already led into bankruptcy, you might as well run up your credit cards and include that in the bankruptcy, because you're going to lose those credit cards anyways. When you declare bankruptcy, you're going to close all bank accounts anyways. Of course, you also have to make sure you understand the laws and wait 90 days before you file bankruptcy, because any debt accrued in that 90 days, or I think it was 90 days, you may still have to pay back. You know, this Kong survival instinct to talk about video games looks interesting. This is yet another game though that I seemingly have missed, but it came out yesterday, so I probably would have seen it. Throne in Liberty, on the other hand, is not being received particularly well. Publisher is Amazon Games. The developer is NCSoft. Free-to-play multi-platform MMORPG. Massive scale P versus P versus E. So yeah, not being received particularly well there. Let's go through the Video Games Chronicle headlines now. Minecraft has launched a PS5 alongside Minecraft has launched for the PS5 alongside hardcore mode and inventory bundles. The Bundles of Bravery update is available for all platforms. I haven't heard about this. I would assume these are Bedrock versions of Minecraft because I just don't think that the Java version is going to get any love on consoles at all. It introduces bundles, which are items that let players store other items inside of items, and hardcore mode. The game already had a hardcore mode, though. Like, I'm fairly certain Minecraft Java had a hardcore mode. So, to me, this seems like Bedrock is really behind the times. And certainly there would have been mods where you could put items inside of other items. The introduction of bundles as a concept, and this is weird animation, perhaps as a statement that Minecraft is just becoming more and more unmanageable with the larger amounts of items that you can craft and mine. But yeah, I mean, what can you really do about that? That in the end, there was always going to be feature creep in any game that is this old. I would generally assume that it feels like Microsoft doesn't really know what to do with Minecraft, and Mojang, for whatever Mojang is now, really just doesn't know what to do with Minecraft. Yeah. For Sony, this is a big win, certainly, in that Sony needs a whole bunch of games, and particularly kid-friendly games. And Minecraft still is particularly kid-friendly. You can see in this picture quite a lot of different biomes compared to what Minecraft has been in the past. But one new biome, one new mining material, one new feature in the way that they are slowly trickled out only does so much for Minecraft. And I definitely am not saying a lot of successful Minecraft streamers of the past sticking with Minecraft or getting a lot of new views from Minecraft when new videos come out, when new updates come out. In a lot of ways, it seems like they are kind of just doing the exact same thing over and over again because there's just not anything new to do. Moving on, sorry, went silent there as I was turning on a new LED in my room. I have this like one corner, like the door opens to my room into a corner and makes this weird little L curve after that into the rest of the room, which creates a very dark area with no lighting, or until I had put in this new LED. And so that whole area has always just been very dim and dark, and it's just not really a great way to light it. You can't really put a floor lamp in that area because there's no plugs and there's no room. Anyways, we're supposed to be talking about video games. Switch Online subscribers can play 3 games for free next week. Minecraft Dungeons, A Little to the Left, and Cursed Golf. Has this been a thing before, where you get game trials? Or is this really just the beginning of Nintendo's slightly catching up as far as online services. Remember that the Nintendo Online subscription is like $20 a year, so it's much cheaper than getting PlayStation Network or Xbox. But even at that, it does make a lot of sense to have trials and be feature parodied for the bigger online services. But yeah, I've not heard Nintendo doing this before, which also might be a statement that only now does Nintendo have the relationships and enough online games to even begin to think to do something like this. Also heard a rumor that the next Nintendo console, assumedly called the Switch 2, is basically going to use the same file formats for its game images. So some of those emulators that they've come against recently and taken down very likely would have very little trouble emulating the next generation of games. Moving on, NCSoft has laid off staff following broader internal reorganization. The company is reportedly working on a Horizon MMO with Sony. DF Retro did a comparison to the remaster of the first Horizon game versus the original, and sang the praises of the new visuals of the remaster. Although I would say the green plants are a little too green in some places in the remaster. I'd say that the character models of the face seem to be about the same shapes, but they have just redone all the faces and added more peach fuzz and features and stuff. So if there really were people, I'm not sure there actually were any people that were complaining specifically about the peach fizz on Aloy's face in the Horizon sequel, it is now in the remaster too. I personally felt like in the sequel they just made the wireframe and of the face broader and kind of fatter and chubbier, which seemed like a very different looking character. And in the remaster of the original game, it also seems like they made her arms a little bit broader too. I think some of this has less to do with even artistic intent as much as it has to do with they in the second game captured people's bodies and faces using cameras, and the lighting on those cameras just had shadows that made the faces broader. Inherently, for decades, directors and producers, directors in movies, have known different shapes of lenses and different shots to do, and have often used that to effects to make real humans on film look like they have skinnier and narrow faces and generally just more attractiveness. Now, I would say most filming these days is probably done digital, and the amount of lenses and why you would use specific lenses probably has been reduced quite a bit, and in favor of just fixing it in post where you could stretch and skew an image. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are actors and actresses that are straight up telling them, having writers in their contracts to have their faces squished and stretched to make themselves look skinnier. Digital touch-up artistry wasn't a thing in the past and definitely is a thing now. So my thought here is that now that you're getting face capture, face rig information, the gaming industry is going to have to realize that digital touch-up needs to be done on that to make it more of a fantasy thing and more of a cartoony thing, instead of trying to be hyper realistic and potentially even missing the point on being hyper realistic because of just a potential extra layer that shadows or the wrong lens might add to a face frame, making faces look chubbier. But yeah, I'm not sure that any of that was ever really a big deal in Horizon Zero Dawn. At the core of it, I just think the Horizon Zero Dawn game was mediocre, and then they Streisand affected anybody who complained about smaller things such as chubby faces or peach fuzz on the face, and then in DLC making Aloy out of the blue be potentially bisexual or lesbian certainly didn't help it too. It seems like they were the liberal, or SJWs would probably be the right term to use, making the content in Zero Dawn were trying to trigger anti-SJWs or conservative people instead of trying to do what would have been best for the game as far as fleshing out stories and explaining things. It would have been fine if Aloy turned out or discovered she was bisexual in a natural process, but to have it in one cutscene that could easily be cut so they could sell it in China is not brave or bold, and having digital characters do something like that is not particularly brave or bold either. So yeah, they definitely muddied the water. That was a long way to get to that point where Horizon feels like an MMO would probably not be attractive enough, which is crazy because at the core game, a Horizon MMO would just be players running around hunting robot dinosaurs. It would be a Monster Hunter clone. It should sell well. It should work well. But the kind of love of Monster Hunter, unfortunately, has been lost or just never built for Horizon. So yeah, I doubt this Horizon MMO is going to work too well. And it is kind of crazy also that Sony is thinking about MMOs at this point. Like, I don't think MMOs coming to console is really ever going to be a big thing. Nobody ever really could get something like World of Warcraft or Elder Scrolls Online to be a hugely successful experience, particularly on console where you can't get macros and you can't make things easier. Whereas if you were going to play an MMO playing on PC where you could install macros and make things automated and easier, makes a lot of sense. Apparently, Ubisoft has reportedly disbanded the Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown team. I think that's a little unfair. I don't think the team itself probably even wanted the game that they were released to be a Prince of Persia game. But yeah, I don't think the game they made was particularly bad. It was probably just being held up to too high of a standard, which also seems like the case in general in Ubisoft, although it doesn't seem like they're quite as bad as Square Enix yet. Yes, and I guess they just disbanded the team and they didn't actually lay off people, they just reassigned them. Low sales means a sequel isn't in the cards. In fairness, there probably shouldn't be a sequel in the cards for this Prince of Persia game, because it again shouldn't have been just a Prince of Persia game. But yeah, this also may very well just be Ubisoft intentionally running their company into the ground. Yeah, this is once again an example of a character who is being introduced almost certainly by SJWs to try and own anti-SJW people, whether those are right-wings people or conservative people or actual liberal people who actually believe in actually accomplishing something that is progressive instead of figurative performances that happen in video games in particular. But yeah, this character being associated with the Prince of Persia, even though I don't think he actually was the Prince of Persia in the game, or maybe he became the Prince of Persia later, just does not work with every other Prince of Persia game. The sad history here is that the Prince of Persia, from its beginning, has always been depicted as a historically inaccurate Western looking white guy, and you kind of have to stick with that to some level. It does, historically, accuracy wise, make a lot of sense that a Prince of Persia might be of African descent and might have hair like this, but probably wouldn't have as fancy of hair like this, where it's just long cornrows. I guess that's what you call that. But yeah, that's just not what the Prince of Persia game is and what people expect. You could certainly make a new game. You could make a co-op character, side character, spin-off character that was something like the Prince of Azerbaijan or something like that, Prince of Constantinople, some ancient country in Africa that could also then introduce a new character and introduce a whole new personality and new abilities. It is crazy to me nobody has tried to make a Sands of Time like game where time rewinds in a long time to just beat Ubisoft to the punch, who's taking forever to make any kind of Sands of Time remake or continuation. Apparently The Wolf Among Us 2 hasn't been cancelled. Telltale says the game was originally due to arrive in 2023. Although it is, I guess, worth pointing out that the Telltale of today is not the Telltale that originally started the Wolf Among Us series. Inherently, I imagine it's an easy license that they just have locked up, so they can just continue to work on the game for as long as they need to. I think the Wolf Among Us comic series is over, so I don't think it's like they're waiting for more of a comic book series to happen. And frankly, the more time they take, the better chance that it is a decent game, although it's still going to be in that Telltale's style of visual novel with minimal interaction and minimal dialogue branches in which it can go in different ways. Of course, Telltale kind of needs to never cancel this game, because if they cancel the game, they don't have anything better to offer. But yeah, at this point, Telltale's name is irrelevant. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of newer gamers that have never even heard of Telltale as a company, where they were flooding the market with Telltale games. Feels like almost a decade ago. The Bungie creative team has joined PlayStation to support live service games. The studio previously said it would integrate 155 roles into Sony Interactive Entertainment. Was 155 roles a company name, or is that just 155 roles? So yeah, it does seem like Sony is thinking live services, Sony is thinking MMOs, and all of that just seems like that is 10-year-old thinking at this point. It doesn't feel like future thinking at all. I would be not particularly happy if it turned out that 5 to 10 years from now, where gamers are back to playing live service games even more, or MMOs even more, particularly on consoles, but anywhere. Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver remasters get a boss reveal trailer, new map details. The remastered collection is coming to PC and consoles in December, which definitely gives me another opportunity if I can ever get around to actually playing games and making footage. Yeah. Moving on to a different game other than Punch Club is still going to be very difficult because I am taking way too long breaks between recording, and that's the only reason why I'm even this far in Punch Club instead of just rage quitting it, is that I'm taking week-long breaks sometimes between one recording session and the other. The Black Ops 6 and Warzone Season 1 release dates may have leaked. Assassin's Creed Shadows Collection Edition has been reduced by 50%. This is also following the cancellation of the game's Season Pass and Early Access. So Ubisoft is seemingly doing a 180, but it almost feels like Ubisoft has already done a 180 in previous years, and now they're just doing a 180 again. And it does just seem like they're being flippant at this point as far as whether they're trying to gouge people with season passes and early access, or whether they're trying to give a decent offering. Inherently, though, there is also just a shadow over Assassin's Creed Shadow, in that the Western world lost interest fairly quickly around the game, which is crazy because this is the game everybody's been saying they wanted, and at least on the face of it, it seems like the game that everybody's been saying they wanted. And the Japanese people got irate at the game for being historically inaccurate very quickly, so that they hate the game more than the Western people do. And clearly this would have been one that they would have hoped it would have grabbed the Japanese audience. Microsoft has launched a new Xbox wireless headset. This is an updated version of the previous model, available for $110 or £100. I would assume these are not directly being made by Microsoft, and they're just putting a branding on it. Dolby Atmos surround sound technology, if custom tweaked to work with an Xbox, might be nice, and frankly that is a cheaper price by far than it would be to buy a surround sound amp that supported Dolby Atmos, or a sound bar that supported Dolby Atmos. Yeah. And yeah, in most people's situations, unfortunately, they just don't have the room and can't afford to have a theater room, so having as good of headphones is a decent thought. But yeah, a TV with stereo still probably sounds better. A good TV pair of speakers probably sounds as good, if not better, than one of these headphones would be. And if there's even one person that sits next to you, the prices go up too high for it to make sense. The Super Smash Bros. Creator has started production on his next game in 2022. Masahiro Sakurai posted a final entry in his Creating Games YouTube series. One would assume that it is once again a Smash Brothers game, because he is a victim of his own success there. The Guerrilla art director says the studio was done with Killzone and prefers to work on Horizon. As a studio, we needed to refresh the palette, artistically, visually speaking. Yeah, I guess that makes some sense. Although this is just the art director saying that, and inherently it would make more sense that if you're done was that successful though. And frankly, at this point, it would make sense if Guerrilla Games said that they are approaching being done with Horizon. Make a third game in the trilogy, wrap up the whole thing, let Sony do its stupid MMO if it wants to try, but after that, just move on to a newer series. The gameplay mechanics in Horizon potentially could use some new features if you were going to make a new series. So here's the story I was talking about before. Sega has sued Memento Mori developer claiming patent infringement. The developer Bank of Innovation, which is an ironic lawsuit, alleged that they infringed on 5 patents held by Sega, with infringements taking place in Memento Mori and the now defunct mobile game Phantom Beast Contract Crypt Rack, which I have no idea what that game is. I've never seen it or played it. One of the patents covers a game mechanic that eliminates the conflicting psychological challenges that arise when using game items with a low drop rate, such as rare cards, by enabling players to play a game without carrying a lot of items with them at all times. Which that is an insanely generic description. In Memento Mori, I can say you're not carrying a lot of items on you at all. There are items so you redeem an item to get crystals, and it would always be the it would already be the same. Industry consultant Dr. Serkan Toto appears to refer to the same patent on X, referring to it as a specific system for fusing character cards of the same kind more easily. You do fuse character cards, well, characters, that they're not really called cards in Memento Mori, but there's not actually any system that makes it any easier. According to Toto, Bank of Innovation is rather small, and $1 billion of damages would significantly hurt Bank of Innovation financially. Following Nintendo suing will develop a pocket pair for patent infringement. This might also signal a new trend in big Japanese studios looking for damages from smaller ones that surprisingly launch hit games. So yeah, this does feel very thuggish. See, I don't know why I'm getting encoding lag on top of network lag. Now, let's see. Responding to the lawsuit, Bank of Innovation says it doesn't believe the game infringes on the patents and said it intends to clarify the validity of its claims during the legal process. It also says it will continue to make memento mori available regardless of the outcome of the lawsuit by taking any measures necessary. But I don't think they have anything right now. And inherently, if Sega wins on patents on this, and Nintendo works on patents against Palworld, there is going to then have to be a mass exodus of smaller and even medium-sized mobile game developers from Japan. They're just going to go over to Korea, where the courts are going to be much more favorable for the Korean companies over a Japanese company. Or they're going to go over to another country where they don't care about Japanese laws at all. So it would be very, very bad for the industry and be very bad. Nintendo also just doesn't want people to realize that they actively aren't making too many games, and they're just slapping their names and their IP onto other developers. And if anything, they should just be proud of it and say, hey, this is what we do, and this is what we've been doing for decades and have been really good at, is being the curator of IPs of the Mario and Luigi, of the Zelda series, by handing it to the right third-party developers, second-party developers. I think you'd use the phrase second-party developers in this case, and making sure that the products come out to our standards. Yeah, it is almost like a McDonald's comparison, where McDonald's corporate wants everybody, the delivery platform for video games still is not something I really believe in. It's something they want to have happen, but it's just not something I have faith in. Alright. And I am not even going to make it to the end here before I have to take my first bathroom break. I'm going to go ahead and just call it that today. So, I'm going to pause the recording and take a break, and then I'll be back in a few minutes. Thread has been around for 2 years. It almost certainly wasn't my original comment. And they just don't act on it. They don't say, we're not going to do this, and shut down the thread, which would be not happy, but at least doing something. Or they say, we're working on it, or just comment anyways, give any kind of update. And that's just Twitch in a nutshell. No new features, no new ideas, no new way to make it stand out. In almost direct contrast to Blue Sky, where every time I go on Twitter now, I'm seeing more and more people saying, go over to Blue Sky. I'm posting only on Blue Sky. It does seem like where the people that I follow on Twitter, which is not really that many people, troll, and even that, the story is a little, could use improvement. Standards are just going to constantly go up higher and higher for games, and so I'm always going to want more. But yeah, more player freedom makes a lot of sense. Of course, you also get some games that go too far in that direction. I feel like Breath of the Wild arguably made too many systems and gave way too much player freedom for a Zelda game, where you're just running around hitting temples if you want to, but getting almost nothing for doing a temple in Breath of the Wild, and not actually getting XP or level. Dark theme. With kind of an odd grayish green highlight. Lego Horizons has recast Silence. This was previously played by the late Lance Reddick. The Horizon spin-off hits consoles and PC next month. Although inherently, what else what are you gonna do? Make the character mute? That probably wouldn't work for him. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there was any other actors that were replaced just because they might be cheaper. Lego Horizon might be a great example of an experiment. quick turn, autocomplete, quick time events. Yeah, we really are at the point where if you're going to have QTE in the game, it should have autocomplete built in. Button tapping with a single tap, weapon charging with taps, healing items with taps. A lot of these you're just never going to play, but they feel like accessibility features. And if you're adding accessibility features after the fact, that feels a little late to the party. Too. Player being invulnerable, player being immortal, also a one-shot kill, which I assume would be a one-shot kill on the player, but maybe it's a one-shot kill on the enemies. Infinite enemy ammo comparison. To see if Rebel Wolves comes out with the next game that should be compared to Witcher 3 instead of a Witcher 4 or Witcher reboot coming from CD Projekt Red. Vampire Survivors is getting Castlevania DLC later this month. This is an older story. And that just finally brings us to the Gamatsu headlines, which if any of these articles were clicked on, I'm not seeing any YouTube pages opened, but whatever. We'll go with it however it went. No Man's Sky, the Cursed Expedition update is now available. No Man's Sky continuing to add content. Steam. and weirdly, one I already own, because I guess I bought several of these Neptunia games thinking I might play them, and at this point I don't think I'm going to get to that point. Never play any of them. The Famitsu review scores for issue 1875 are available on Gamatsu, giving Democracy 4 a very low 27 out of 40, Dragon Ball Sparking 0, 34 out of 40, so slightly above average. Romancing Saga 2, Revenge of the Seven, 36 out of 40, fairly high score, although actually very varied in that 2 8s, a 10, and a 9. Apparently it also takes 40 to 50. Is you would have had early beat 'em up games like Double Dragon of evolve into things like Mortal Kombat, where there's more of a skill set and move set, and then less of walking around generic background art or fighting the same 5 sprites over and over again. And so I do think it is kind of a pop mode, changes the visuals and just changes how the game plays a little bit. So it's possible that this big new content update may be the strands of what they had developed before they pivoted to make it a remaster instead of a sequel. And this might be a statement that we are not ever going to get a sequel, which odds were particularly low we were ever going to get a sequel anyways, so it's probably not that big of a loss. The worst case scenario here is that the big new content is something that is just not that big. It's just like a bunch of all you could do in this sequel with Lollipop Chainsaw 2. Also, it's just not too much you can do to change the game unless you just want to make a completely different game, which I don't think that works when your main premise is a cheerleader with a chainsaw. It is a 3D beat 'em up game. Unless you wanted to evolve it to a 3D fighting game, which wouldn't work because there's not enough good characters in Lollipop Chainsaw for that to make sense. The next level of evolution would be to take Lollipop Chainsaw and try and make a sequel that is like Dead Rising, where you are stuck in a shopping mall with just you probably would do well in modern times to age up Juliet and have her be a college freshman, making her 19 years old, maybe 20, even pushing her to 21, just for legalese reasons. But yeah, more zombies on screen and more little gimmick sequences and experiments. A lot of what Lollipop Chainsaw was experiments too. Clearly, Lollipop Chainsaw isn't one of the games I'd like to play and talk more about. And I guess there's probably a lot of those games if I can just remember which ones those are and which one may have already talked about this. Again, a game that's very relevant, so I should play those games even though I haven't in the past. Metal Slug launches November 5th. This is the first time we've seen an image that seems to be noticeably out of order. So I'll see if there's something to that screenshot I can adjust. It's possible all of these images are getting cropped off by several pixels in the top, and that is not the intention. It certainly would explain why a lot of these articles really is. People say there's something in the simplicity of games like Tetris, but in reality, Tetris is one of maybe 4 or 5 games that are playable. Pong is not really playable. Asteroids, not really playable. Many older games than Tetris, not really relevant or playable these days. And we had already saw that Masahiro Sakurai began work on a new project in April 2022. Should be announced. Of course, if I was a more creative person, I would figure out a way to reference these games while still staying well within the rules of YouTube, but that's more than likely going to involve a lot of cutting, editing, and basically censoring. The thing I guess I really would want to know, there is, what does the first game look like? I understand the story is that the main character hits his head, thinks he's a pirate, so one would assume that all of the other characters are playing along unless they are just hallucinations. Yeah. Silly, like a silly little spin-off that might be fairly fun play. If anything, this might be one of the Yakuza games that has more female forward protagonists than the previous games. I don't know where to look to click on it. Okay, Fear the Spotlight came out in September of 2023, and so I can move that to my wish list, which I've not really been doing any fall list cleanup, so that's just getting worse and worse again. The unified launcher for Windows game on Linux, UMU. Version 1.1.3 is out now, continuing to improve compatibility with Windows games on Linux outside of Steam. I imagine these are going to come very quickly, and that is the danger, certainly, of following just a Linux specific website, is that a lot of specifically on making visuals on Linux better. And then we could get into more of the weeds as far as the update. NVIDIA fairly consistently updates its drivers, almost on a monthly basis at minimum. So, yeah. It does seem like we probably will see update notices of that fairly quickly, fairly often. The Auto Battler Dungeon Crawler Skull Horde has been announced by the developer of Boar Blasters. Again, visually not particularly that interesting. Coma 2B Catacomb. You can get over 60 games for free with Prime Gaming right now, many of which work on Steam Deck and Linux. Most of these are coming either through good old games or Amazon. Though, Epic Game Store. So, yeah. And I imagine that there isn't too many games here that are that new. But BioShock Remastered certainly is not a game that's bad. 3.5 headphones could produce elevated background noise on reconnect until the next sleep or resume. And then the issue where certain games would crash with a page allocation failure after a long play session. Notice that they can actually spell session correctly here. Yep. We are effectively assuming that there shouldn't be any new features at this point as far as the next version of SteamOS, and that they should just constantly put out bug fixes and betas of bug fixes to make sure the bug fixes actually fix things and don't break things. And then we'll see a SteamOS major number, or at least minor number, update happen. Android 13, which you kind of would hope you could jump all the way to Android 15 from Android 11 and just skip that, but it doesn't seem like that's something he can do yet, and that may very well have to do with Waydroid itself, which he doesn't really control, needing to just update its compatibility layers and such. Although inherently in the case of running Android games on the Steam Deck, I kind of just want to see Valve take over that project and have it be installed by default and just work. And really there's just not even crossing over to a point where we would see mobile games be more playable on Windows and x86 operating systems and computer and hardware. Yeah. I don't know what other tweaks SteamOS really needs to do. It's gonna be small little things here and there. Things we really didn't even think of. Let's see. The Portal 2 project lead wants Valve to return to single-player games. During a PAX Australia, there was the project leader who did an interview at Kiwi Talks. This would make inherently, it always does feel like, well, it has felt like, at least in the previous decades, that working at Valve was the end of your career, and that you could sit around and do nothing and get paid. But unfortunately, that's all you can do. You're not going to add anything to your resume or develop any new games. It's frankly shocking we even got a Portal 2. Kind of shocking we even got a Portal 1. Let's see. Vampire Survivors Ode to Castlevania DLC arrives for Halloween. Yep. Most games not really doing anything for Halloween. No real Halloween sales happen either. A more wider variety of things you can purchase, but Kohl's may not have video games. They might have toys, but they may not have video games. But overall, I'd say if you need that both of those closes. Both of those companies are desperate to get anybody to walk into the store that they're willing to accept Amazon returns in favor of that, because I don't think Staples or Amazon or Kohl's are actually owned by your experience is going to vastly differ based on whether you like full motion video or not. And there's really not a good reason for FMV games to play fairly well on Steam Deck and Linux, because the majority of the gameplay is just watching videos with the occasional dialogue choice or click in a specific direction. And then the Atari 50 collection Humble Bundle. And then I guess that would be GameDeveloper.com articles, but it doesn't look like we have any GameDeveloper.com articles today. I don't know if that's maybe because something, if I go 2 hours and 13 minutes, 2 hours and 30 minutes, then I'm gonna be late. And unfortunately, while that sounds like something that's doable, there is definitely a case where I very often run into bathroom breaks or just don't want to start immediately at the time I need to start. It's just a lot of times I want to sit down and build up my emotional energy, for lack of a better term, before going on stage and streaming. And certainly it doesn't. Does this support English? Shinchan, Shiro, and Cold Town actually supporting English. I'm a little surprised about that. Soccer Manager. It probably gets a YouTube short. Since we are picking games that deserve YouTube shorts based on my very superficial appearance and look at them, it is worth pointing out that YouTube, and I imagine YouTube is actually run this way in the background always, has just done a very weird, poor, in most people's opinion, multi-phasal rollout of them being shown as regular old videos, which, yeah, has created a huge amount of confusion, and YouTube has put out at least 3 updates to try and quell that confusion. It does just seem like they've created more of a problem by not just having it ready to go on day one and having all the interfaces understand how it's going to work. I cannot tell if this is like a slightly topless girl or not. Let's see, scroll down here and see what the adult content. Notably though, that's pretty much true everywhere. Dungeon Tiny Hunter. It's probably nothing, but there is something to be said about this character design. Definitely has kind of more of that moe style, big head, OBS, we'll talk about this later, is trying to commit to less confusing or less amounts of updates. They've been yeah, it almost certainly does make more sense for them to have major updates once a year as far as new features, and or just separate patch updates from major updates. Of course, a lot of that is just also the downloader's fault. You don't really need to install new major updates to OBS if you're happy with the way the software is working now and you're not running into problems or bugs. Now, there was a whole project that I got too busy around and effectively abandoned at the beginning of this year, which that problems could pop up, and that's true for anyone, really. Like, most people are only a disaster or two away from that happening. But yeah, my concern is with OBS updating that I'd have to reprogram the whole thing. Although it probably wouldn't really change that much. But it's not particularly good if I'm potentially trying to sell product and the first instructions are to install an older version of OBS. I'm being fairly generous on what I'm gonna make. But there are a lot of art styles that exist that still have had very few, if no, games made around it. It is kind of crazy that if you look at like all the death metal, black metal album art that has existed, very little of that has ever been brought over to a video game. And album art probably is a good place where you could see several different art styles that could be used to make video games or inspire video games, whereas a lot of other art styles are kind of more generic. If you just go into historical painting, it's going to be landscapes and portraits, and while there can be several different art styles, there's only a few artists that potentially are a weird squeaking, almost like a meowing. Oh, I kind of had the door unlocked, hoping the door didn't open, and we now have a stray cat in the house. Although, yeah, I'll have to check that. Anyways, this stream is about to be done. So here's the story I was talking about. Their plan to stop confusing everyone with OBS version, with OBS Studio 31 on the Ryzen is a good time to reflect on how previous process works and how we're handling versioning. Also, once you get up to 31, you're not really competing with anybody at that point as far as versions go. The Linux kernel is only up to like version 6 as far as a major number. Over the years, I've experienced a lot of growth, and the bad habits I was able to develop when I was taught programming in school back a long time ago, when things like Git wouldn't have not worked and GitHub and the internet was not even an option. But yeah, for my own peace of mind, I should be documenting every little change using GitHub on any project I work on. Let's see. They didn't have a strict structure or consistency on deciding what releases, when to release release a new version and how to label it. Sometimes a major version would include breaking changes, and other times it was simply a feature-packed release. They wanted to highlight this inconsistency. Could be confusing, and moving forward they are committing to major version numbers strictly for updates that fundamentally change how you use OBS or schedule. While they're not going to have strict deadlines, they're going to aim for a new release every 4 months. This loose schedule gives contributors and users a better idea of what new features and fixes without sacrificing quality by rushing development. Now notice that they really can't change how patch updates happen, and we probably will see patch and minor updates happening a little more frequently as they move away from making major number changes when they really didn't need to. Here was another thing outside of the longer YouTube shorts that YouTube's official blog pointed out, in that now you can move the mini player all over the screen. Codes basically only make sense if you're going to print them on business cards or flyers or something. If you're promoting a playlist to your audience on YouTube, doing that through QR code just adds an extra step. It clearly is a feature that should have existed. You should basically be able to share anything as a QR code, on PC and on mobile, and mostly on mobile you can share almost anything. But playlists can now also have custom thumbnails, which might make playlists more attractive. And you can also vote up and vote down videos if you enable it, having a goal being reached too early, but also perhaps having more reasonable goals instead of just constantly asking people to donate might be a smarter move. It is also, I guess, worth pointing out that this lady is the lady in charge overall of several larger departments in YouTube, and she seemed pretty disconnected, and we're not really seeing the main guy put out news updates. I think he's on vacation or something, so they've got a new girl doing the updates. Also, it was quite a while ago, October 17th, but the Unity Engine 6. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.